Diddy's empire is crumbling, and the truth is finally coming to light. The music mogul, once untouchable, is now at the center of an explosive scandal as leaked evidence exposes secrets that could bring his entire legacy crashing down. For years, Diddy has projected an image of power, success, and influence. But behind the scenes, a much darker reality is unfolding, one that he can no longer keep hidden. First off, let's address the elephant in the room, these so-called dark secrets. For years, Diddy has been at the top of his game, building an empire that spans music, fashion, and even television.
The high-powered defense team for Sean Diddy Combs is demanding that the prosecution hand over information about what they plan to claim at Combs' upcoming trial and the witnesses they plan to call, and they say they need this information now to prepare a real defense. I've got the latest court filings in this ongoing legal saga. Welcome to Sidebar, presented by Law and Crime. I'm Jesse Weber. The trial of embattled music mogul and entertainment titan Sean Diddy Combs is going to be here before you know it. He's scheduled to face a jury in May on federal charges of racketeering conspiracy, sex trafficking by force, fraud, or coercion, and transportation to engage in prostitution. Combs' lawyers are actually, though, trying to get that last charge thrown out, calling it racist. We'll get a little bit more into that later on, but Combs has consistently denied any wrongdoing, and his attorneys say he is looking forward to defending himself in court. And the key word there, defending. They need to put on a defense, because when it comes to the trial, the defense and the prosecution, they have been overwhelmed with discovery, terabytes of data that has likely resulted in possibly an information overload. There's a lot of information here. But one thing the defense says it doesn't have is a complete list of witnesses.
Rumors have always swirled. And now, with this leaked evidence, those rumors are gaining traction. We're talking about allegations that go beyond just business deals gone wrong. We're talking about behavior that, if true, could completely dismantle the legacy he's built. Sources close to the situation reveal that investigators have obtained damning evidence that directly ties Diddy to years of alleged corruption, manipulation, and illicit dealings. The leaked files, which are now circulating online, paint a picture of a man who built his empire not just through talent and business acumen, but through carefully orchestrated tactics designed to keep himself at the top.
He was there for several weeks. He was arrested in New York in September pursuant to a grand jury indictment from the Southern District of New York. And the main allegations from prosecutors are that he used his wealth and his influence to intimidate people into performing sex acts with commercial sex workers for his own gratification. And they claim he was heading up a criminal enterprise that was involved in all sorts of illicit activity, from arson to kidnapping to sex trafficking. But we go back to October 15th, and Combs' attorneys filed their letter to the court. And it said, "We write on behalf of our client, Mr. Sean Combs, pursuant to Federal Rule of Criminal Procedure 7, to request that the court direct the government to identify its alleged victims so that Mr. Combs can prepare for trial and to allow defense counsel to ensure compliance with Local Rule 23.1.1. Now, a bill of particulars is a written statement of charges or claims that the government is making, establishing the issues of the case. It provides a little bit more details, a little bit more of specificity. It helps the defendant prepare for trial, make sure there aren't, any surprises at trial. And the defense noted in their letter to the judge, quote, "This case is unique, in part because of the number of individuals levying allegations against Mr. Combs due to his celebrity status, wealth, and the publicity of his previously settled lawsuit, and the grand jury leaks and false inflammatory statements by the DHS agents as outlined in our previous motion."
Associates once loyal to him are now speaking out. These individuals, who were once part of his inner circle, claim that they witnessed firsthand the lengths Diddy went to in order to maintain his position of power. Some say they were silenced, threatened, or paid off to keep quiet. But now, with mounting legal pressure and public scrutiny, the truth is finally coming to the surface. One of the most shocking revelations from the leaked evidence is the extent of Diddy's alleged involvement in backdoor deals that many believed were mere rumors.
P. Diddy ringing in the new year with a jailhouse meltdown, at least according to some new reports. All this comes as the disgraced singer spends his first holiday season behind bars, and a judge rules one of his accusers can remain anonymous. By now you're well aware that 55-year-old Sean Combs, also known as P. Diddy, is being held at the Metropolitan Detention Center in Brooklyn. He's facing federal charges of racketeering conspiracy, sex trafficking by force, fraud, or coercion, and transportation to engage in prostitution. The charges came down in September when a grand jury indicted Diddy, half a year after those federal raids were first performed on his homes. Since he was booked, Diddy has made several bids for bail, hoping to get back to one of those homes or an apartment on New York's Upper East Side. Just last month, Diddy's team officially put in its third attempt for his release, asking that he be put on house arrest. The defense originally wanted Diddy to be held on house arrest at his Star Island mansion in Miami, Florida, one of the places that was actually raided way back in March.
Documents suggest a complex web of influence where money, favors, and intimidation played a significant role in shaping careers, silencing critics, and even manipulating the industry itself. Some claim that Diddy's reach extended far beyond music, into politics, business, and high-profile social circles where few dared to challenge him. Former associates, once loyal to him, are now speaking out. These individuals, who were once part of his inner circle, claim that they witnessed firsthand the lengths Diddy went to in order to maintain his position of power.
That bail would have come with a $50 million price tag and some major restrictions on Diddy's house arrest. Inside the apartment, there would be 2 live-in guards and another guard downstairs. Diddy wouldn't be allowed to access any phones or the internet unless it was used to contact his legal team. And on top of all of that, there would be a vetted list of people approved to visit Diddy, including his legal counsel and, of course, his family. Diddy's attorney, Mark Agnifilo, said there was a 0% chance that Diddy would be violent if he was released, and even called the bail package a, quote, very, very rigorous set of conditions. This part is wild. He said it was even more strict than the MDC jail. But Judge Subramanian, he didn't bite on that, and Diddy's bail was denied for the 3rd time. According to a report from the Daily Mail, that's why Diddy had a breakdown. A person close to him apparently said, quote, spending the holidays behind bars was a nightmare for him. If we're to believe all this, Diddy had a meltdown in his cell and begged the guards to take him to the hospital for observation, but they refused. This same friend or person told the Daily Mail, quote, he eventually managed to calm himself down with the meditation technique he's been using while he's been behind bars. It took him a few hours of deep breathing and focusing to get out of the bad space he was in, but he finally managed it.
Some say they were silenced, threatened, or paid off to keep quiet. But now, with mounting legal pressure and public scrutiny, the truth is finally coming to the surface. But as the evidence piles up, his empire is beginning to show cracks. Major business partners are distancing themselves, endorsements are being reconsidered, and even longtime friends are refusing to stand by him as the allegations grow more serious. The industry that once celebrated him is now watching from the sidelines, waiting to see if this is truly the end of an era.
So we're turning now to former federal prosecutor Nima Rahmani to talk all things Diddy. Nima, thank you so much for coming on with us today.
Of course, Sierra, thanks for having me as always.
Now, some of the reports are that P. Diddy had a breakdown or meltdown over the holidays when he is still at MDC behind bars. What do you make of those reports? Could he have had this meltdown?
I believe the reports, and obviously Diddy is someone who's rich and famous and has lived a life of luxury for many years, and now he's in federal prison during the holidays. So this is someone who's a hardened criminal who has spent a lot of time in custody. So the fact that he's spending Christmas and New Year's and future holidays in prison is probably finally getting to him. So I'm not surprised that he cracked.
You're right, it's definitely a change of tune from his lavish mansions and the holiday season to what he's experiencing right now. As far as the mental health side of things, I remember when Diddy was first arrested, he was put on suicide watch. So obviously keeping tabs on his mental health. Here in this instance, he apparently was asking for the guards to take him to the hospital so he could be treated there. Is this something that we're gonna keep an eye on?
Now, I know some of you might be thinking, well, this is all just speculation. Where's the proof? And you're right. Until there's concrete evidence, we can't jump to conclusions. But the fact that these leaks are out there and that they're being taken seriously tells us that there's more to this story than meets the eye. And as more information comes out, we're going to have to confront some uncomfortable truths about the people we idolize. Social media is in a frenzy, with fans and critics divided. Some believe Diddy is being targeted, that these leaks are part of a larger agenda to take him down.
When a district judge or a magistrate judge hears a bail motion, it's a de novo standard, which means for the first time. That means the previous applications, the denials, they don't have any precedential impact. But when you go up on appeal, Sierra, that changes. An appellate court can only reverse a lower court's decision on bail if it's an abuse of discretion. So they really have to defer to that lower court. So the chances of the bail application being granted on appeal were less because of the different standard. And also, we know the application has gotten worse because of Diddy's own conduct while he's in prison. We've talked about how he's used other inmates' pack numbers and he's made these three-way calls allegedly, trying to intimidate witnesses. So not only do you have the bail denied because there's a risk of flight or danger of the community, but also because he's trying to obstruct justice and affect the integrity of the proceedings.
A lot going on even behind bars for Diddy. I know we talked, you and I believe, about those allegations that he was using other inmates' phone calls or their lines, you just mentioned it, to talk about things so that prosecutors couldn't listen in. I'm sure that federal prosecutors are still keeping a very close eye on P. Diddy, his communication with the outside world, as it were. Do you think they're going to use any of this information at the coming trial?
Others argue that this is simply a long overdue reckoning, that the truth was bound to come out eventually. Regardless of where public opinion lands, one thing is certain: Diddy's world is unraveling faster than anyone could have anticipated. And as for Diddy, well, only time will tell how this plays out. But one thing's for sure: this is a moment that could define his legacy, for better or for worse. So let's keep our eyes open. Stay informed, and most importantly, let's not forget the power of the truth. Legal experts are weighing in, suggesting that if the leaked evidence is legitimate, Diddy could be facing not just financial ruin, but possible criminal charges.
Peter, you have to anticipate the defense in the case. And the defense in this case is clear, that the sexual contact happened, but it was consensual. So Diddy's defense team is going to do everything they can to convince the jury that even though the freak-offs happened, these were consensual sexual acts by adults. So how can they do this? They can do it through cross-examination to try to show that the victims who are testifying, they're lying. They can try to pay off the victims, either through an outright bribe or a civil settlement. I'm not accusing anyone of doing anything. These are all possibilities. The government has raised the possibility that Diddy's trying to intimidate the witnesses so they change their testimony. Because obviously, we know, it doesn't matter what the victims say in their civil complaints or what they told the FBI or prosecutors. They have to take the stand, testify, and tell the jurors the exact same thing. So if these victims go sideways, either before or during trial, that really helps Diddy in the defense.
Investigators are reportedly combing through years of records, searching for inconsistencies and connecting dots that had previously gone unnoticed. The question now is, will Diddy be able to fight back, or has the damage already been done? All right, folks, let's dive into this because this is big. We're talking about Diddy, a name that's been synonymous with success, power, and influence in the music industry for decades. But lately, the narrative has shifted, and not in a good way. Leaked evidence has surfaced, and it's painting a picture that's far from the glamorous empire we've all known.
In their letter to the judge, quote, "This case is unique, in part because of the number of individuals levying allegations against Mr. Combs due to his celebrity status, wealth, and the publicity of his previously settled lawsuit, and the grand jury leaks and false inflammatory statements by the DHS agents as outlined in our previous motion. This has had a pervasive ripple effect, resulting in a torrent of allegations by unidentified complainants spanning from the false to outright absurd. Essentially, it's how do we know who's going to be part of this criminal case when there's been already so many lawsuits filed against Sean Combs, so many accusations. We got to be clear about what we're defending against. And by the way, as you heard, the defense had previously accused the government of leaking information to the press and the public, something the U.S. Attorney's Office strongly denied. And since then, Combs is faced with even more lawsuits in both federal and state court as more Jane and John Does came forward to accuse him of rape and sexual assault. By the way, I have to say this. There is an issue that is affecting a ton of people right now. It's personal debt. We've all felt the pressure under credit card bills, personal loans, medical bills. Getting out of debt can feel impossible, but it doesn't have to be.
So, what's really going on? Let's break it down. The fallout from these revelations extends beyond just Diddy. The people who work closely with him, the artists he mentored, and even the companies that collaborated with him are now under scrutiny. How much did they know? Were they complicit, or were they just as in the dark as the public? These are the questions being asked. And as more information comes to light, more people may find themselves caught in the crossfire.
Defense's letter. Quote, bills of particulars are appropriate to permit a defendant to identify with sufficient particularity the nature of the charge pending against him, thereby enabling defendant to prepare for trial, to prevent surprise, and to interpose a plea of double jeopardy should he be prosecuted a second time for the same offense. These principles are applied with particular care when the government charges RICO, as it has here. As the Second Circuit explained, with the wide latitude accorded the prosecution to frame a charge the defendant has conspired to promote the affairs of an enterprise through a pattern of racketeering activity, comes an obligation to particularize the nature of the charge to a degree that might not be necessary in the prosecution of crimes of more limited scope, meaning this is a very particular prosecution. We need more details. And the defense contends that the prosecution should be required to identify victims for several reasons. First, without clarity from the government, Mr. Combs has no way of knowing which allegations the government is relying on for purposes of the indictment. Other than victim one, there's no way for Mr. Combs to undermine who the other unidentified alleged victims are, the number of potential alleged victims, and the length of time alleged in the indictment both weigh in favor of a bill of particulars. By the way, there's been
Now, I'm not here to speculate or spread unverified information, but what we do know is that these leaks suggest a pattern of behavior that's deeply troubling. There are claims of manipulation, exploitation, and even abuse of power. And let's be real, this isn't the first time we've heard whispers about Diddy's darker side. But this time, it's different. This time, there's evidence, documents, recordings, and testimonies that are hard to ignore. So, where do we go from here? Well, for starters, we need to keep the conversation going. We need to hold people accountable, not just in the entertainment industry, but in all areas of life. Because at the end of the day, no one is above the law, and no one should be able to hide behind their fame or fortune.
Quote, absent a bill of particulars, the government is forcing him unfairly to play a guessing game, one made all the more challenging by the onslaught of baseless allegations that desperate plaintiffs are lodging at him, for the most part anonymously, in civil suits designed to exact a payoff from Mr. Combs and others. Second, given the anticipated amount of discovery and the expected time required for its production, Mr. Combs will be unable to adduce the identities of the purported victims from the discovery without the assistance of the government. Mr. Combs also anticipates that the discovery will contain voluminous evidence of consensual sexual activity, making it all the more difficult for Mr. Combs to ascertain which of his prior sexual partners now claim, years later, that they felt coerced. Even if it were possible to ascertain the victim's identity from the discovery, and especially given the volume of anticipated discovery, it is unfair to require Mr. Combs to spend significant time trying to unearth the alleged victims' identities. Now, the prosecution asked for a little bit more time to respond to the defense's letter, which the judge granted, and then at the end of October, the government submitted its own filing, which included some details about its investigation so far, the sheer volume of information they were gathering, it reads. To date, the grand jury has issued over 300 subpoenas, and the government has interviewed over 50 witnesses, several of whom testified before the grand jury.
Some of Diddy's longtime allies are reportedly cooperating with authorities, offering insider knowledge in exchange for their own legal protection. If this is true, it could be the final nail in the coffin for his defense. Once loyalty starts to break down, the floodgates open, and there's no telling how many more shocking secrets will emerge. This isn't just another celebrity scandal. This is a complete unraveling of one of the most influential figures in modern music history. The legacy that Diddy spent decades building is at risk of being wiped away overnight.
The limitation on the availability of a bill of particulars is important, as a bill of particulars confines the government's proof to particulars furnished and therefore can restrict unduly the government's ability to present its case. Basically, if we give you that bill of particulars right now, then we might be just limiting to just what's in that filing, which could hamper our case down the road, especially if we're continuing to investigate what's going on. The prosecution says courts routinely reject requests for victim identities in cases involving crimes of violence and racketeering, especially when the government demonstrates a risk to witness safety, the potential for witness intimidation, or subordination of perjury. Courts also routinely deny requests for bill of particulars containing victims' names on the basis that these requests are in reality a backdoor attempt to obtain a list of the witnesses whom the government intends to call at trial. But notwithstanding the defendant's procedural failure, the motion also fails on the merits because there's no need for a bill of particulars listing victim names here. The defendant has been more than sufficiently apprised of the nature of the charges he faces based on, inter alia, the 14-page speaking indictment, the government's written submissions and factual proffers at 2 separate bail hearings, and discovery produced to date, totaling over 25 terabytes of data, including detailed search warrant affidavits laying out details of the government's investigation and evidence. Courts have repeatedly rejected requests for bills of particulars where the defendant has received similar materials.
Testimonies emerge, and more evidence is revealed. It's becoming harder and harder for him to escape the reality of his situation. But let's get back to Diddy specifically. Because love him or hate him, there's no denying that he's been a major force in the music industry for decades. From Bad Boy Records to Ciroc Vodka, he's built an empire that's worth billions. But at what cost? That's the question we need to be asking. Because if these allegations are true, then it means that his success came at the expense of others. And that's not something we should be celebrating.
After those interviews, the reporters and the media outlets saw some inconsistencies, things that were incorrect in terms of maybe the dates or the locations of where things happened. And I think the defense is going to use that to say, well, these people are mistaken. They're outright lying, and the reason they're lying is they want fame, they want money. So we're going to see a very aggressive cross-examination in this case here.
The story that you brought up about Jane Doe, the woman who's accusing Diddy and Jay-Z from back in the year 2000 when she was 13 years old, that one's huge because a judge in that case just ruled she could remain Jane Doe. So for now, at least, we don't know her name. If that's the case for some of these people that the government is going to call, how will Diddy's team prepare for cross-examination if they're not sure exactly who they are or what the experience was?
So it's a little bit different in remaining anonymous in a civil case. Ultimately, if a case does go to trial, that victim will have to take the stand and testify in a public courtroom. Now, with respect to what the government is going to do in the criminal case, right?
Because let's be real. If these allegations had come out 10 or 20 years ago, do you think anyone would have listened? Probably not. But times are changing, and people are starting to wake up to the fact that the entertainment industry isn't all glitz and glamour. There's a dark side to it, and it's time we started talking about it. This story is far from over. More leaks are expected, more whistleblowers may come forward, and law enforcement is intensifying its investigation. Diddy may have once controlled the narrative, but right now, the truth is controlling him. And no amount of power, money, or influence may be enough to stop what's coming next. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. Because as much as we want to see justice served, we also have to be careful not to jump to conclusions.
But the problem, according to Subramanian, is that if you look at the case law on this, a defendant really needs to establish that connection between privileged information that was improperly obtained and the prosecution. And Subramanian writes, Combs doesn't come close to making such a showing, particularly now that the government has disavowed use of the notes or evidence derived from them. In other words, Combs is only speculating that the government's evidence is somehow tainted. He really hasn't shown how. Quote, the generic nature of the notes makes it unlikely that any improper use of the information has or could be made. They give Combs general thoughts on how to approach certain issues, none of which would come as a surprise. However, if a question arises closer to trial as to the use of suspect evidence and Combs can make a threshold showing that the evidence is tainted, then Combs can bring it to the court's attention. Until then, the government is cautioned to be mindful of Combs' privilege and the need to abide by filter team processes. While there is currently no demonstrated need for a special master, the court recommends that the filter team clear potential privileged documents with the defense before turning them over to the case team. So the judge kind of admonishing and also instructing what the prosecutors and the filter team need to do moving forward. And there you have it. Definitely not a win for Sean Combs. No violation of his rights. There's no hearing.
These are serious allegations, and they deserve to be taken seriously. But they also need to be investigated thoroughly, because at the end of the day, everyone deserves due process, even someone like Diddy. Some of Diddy's longtime allies are reportedly cooperating with authorities, offering insider knowledge in exchange for their own legal protection. If this is true, it could be the final nail in the B at his doorstep. All right, that's all I've got for now. But you know I'll be keeping a close eye on this story as it develops. So make sure you're subscribed and hit that notification bell, because you're not going to want to miss what happens next. Until then, stay safe, stay informed, and I'll catch you in the next one. Peace.